Welcome to the INC Transportation Committee meeting for September 10th, 2020. We meet every month since we've gone to virtual online, and we have a number of topics each month that try to be timely and relevant to our evolving multimodal city. This month we have 5 topics in only 90 minutes. We're going to start with 3 short topics. These are announcements. These are things that you may want to take back to your neighborhood group or your network. And then we'll go into our 2 longer topics, TDM, Transportation Demand Management, which is an effort the city started a couple years ago. So it's great to get an update on that. And then we'll be joined by Angie Rivera-Malpiede, RTD Board Chair. So first I'd like to introduce Kayla Gilbert. She's with Denver Calc, and she'll be talking about next week's Denver Streets for People Summit. I will stop sharing my screen. Kayla, you can take over.
All right. Okay, I think everyone should be able to see my screen now, and hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you and see your screen.
Great. Hey, everybody. So my name is Kayla Gilbert. I work for the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure in the Office of Community and Business Engagement. If you're into the acronyms, that's DOTI and OCBE. I run a grant-funded program called the Denver Community Active Living Coalition. The Denver Community Active Living Coalition. And so we are hosting a huge event that we are co-hosting with Denver Streets Partnership next week called the Streets for People Summit. So this is going to be a really exciting virtual event. This will be it's a locally hosted, globally inspired conference that's focused on creating safer and more inviting streets and public spaces, while also reducing car dependency and fighting climate change. These are some pictures from our summit last year. Over 4 days this year of virtual discussions and networking, we'll be sharing local success stories, resources and opportunities, exploring best practices and ideas from around the world, and networking and collaborating with other folks, decision makers, implementers, and community members, other folks a lot like yourself. So this is our 3rd annual event. We have done this event before, so some of you may have been in the past when we did this in person. So it's going to be similar, but a little bit different as we're going all virtual. We're breaking up the sessions into a few days so that you can attend as you can with your schedule. We don't have to pack it all into one night. We know that that was always exhausting for people. So we're kind of leaning into the virtual space here by spreading it out. We'll also be recording a lot of our panels so that you can be able to watch them later. There are 4 main different types of sessions. A traditional virtual panel, a lot like what you'll see tonight. We'll be holding it in Microsoft Teams or in Zoom, depending on the topics. There will be a couple in-person options for small walks and bike rides. Those will be really limited capacity in person, but we'll also be live streaming all of them so that there'll be videos for folks who can't attend. There will also be some fun virtual networking sessions. And the new part of this year really is these global conversations. We're partnering with an organization called Shared Studios to bring experts from across the world on different topics around Streets for People. So here's a quick recap of the program at a glance, but you can see more details on our website. It's denvercalc.org/summit that Joel shared in the agenda. So we're going to kick it off on Wednesday. We've got a walking tour in the morning in Westwood that I'm leading. Our first Shared Studios global conversation is the future of urban mobility. That'll be co-moderated by Jill Locantore from Denver Streets Partnership. Then we've got a fun networking team trivia hour. And then our opening keynote Wednesday night is going to be around the future of transit in a post-COVID world. We have an amazing keynote speaker, Cam Hardy, from the Cincinnati Better Bus Coalition that'll be speaking to us for a keynote. And then we'll have a panel of local experts that'll be moderated by the executive director of DOTI, that's Ulyss Cleckley. And so that's going to be a really great session you don't want to miss. Then Thursday, we have another walking tour, another global conversation, another networking event that's Complete Streets Pictionary that I'm leading and I'm really excited about. And then a bike storytelling session with a couple different folks with different stories and perspectives around biking. Friday, we've got our last global conversation, and that's reimagining movement. And then we've got a networking event, our last one also, that's all icebreakers. One more tour. This one will be a virtual option that folks can tune in for. Saturday morning, one more bike tour in Montbello, and then we've got a panel on walking and biking loops in Denver. We actually had these same panelists last year, and so we're going to be coming back to them. Where are they now? Talking about 4 different walking and biking loops being planned in the city of Denver. And then our closing session is going to be our Fast and Curious. So this is a rapid fire presentation, 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide, if you've ever seen those quick ones. We've got 4 local speakers who pitched their ideas to us that we've selected to bring to you. And that one is also going to be emceed by CBS 4 sports reporter Justin Adams. So that's going to be a really fun, exciting closing for us as well. So again, the website's denvercalc.org/summit. There is a cost to the event, but it's sliding scale, and I want to make sure everyone knows there is a free option. It's called the Community Scholarship, and it's available to anyone who needs it. So we know that cost might be a barrier for folks. If that's a barrier for you, not anymore. We've got a free option for you. We also are offering translation and interpretation, so just pick that when you register. And a little bit about last year's event, we had 161 attendees, hoping we can blow that out of the water with our virtual event this year. Almost all of our attendees from our evaluation found the speakers to be really engaging, and most of our attendees learned about new resources, opportunities, or ideas that they brought back to our city. So again, the Streets for People Summit, please register, check it out, denvercalc.org/summit, or email me if you have any questions. We're looking forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much. That's how you do a short topic here. That was fantastic. I've signed up. I hope everyone who can goes, both for live and for the walking tours, and if you need to, for the pre-recorded. And I really like the sliding scale thing. I think more folks are doing that to make things more inclusive. I joined something the other day that had 2 options, a general admission and a generous admission. And that's a really good thing to do. Thank you. We'll just leave this on the screen in case people need the URL for a minute while we bring up Kate Williams. Kate Williams is the Executive Director of DRMAC. Kate, why don't you first tell us DRMAC, Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council, and a little bit about travel training.
Okay, travel training. We have a new program called the Metro Area Travel Training Program, and I can actually put whenever you get ready, I can put our logo up there.
Go ahead, go for it.
I know how to do it. I practiced beforehand. Host disabled participant screen sharing. You have to allow me to share.
Yeah, I didn't know you had anything to share from our setup.
It's just a slide. It's one slide. But
okay, Kayla, can you stop sharing? Thank you.
Okay. So now I can. Oh yeah, I did practice. Let me see how long it takes me to figure this out. I go to my thing. I go to there. I go here. Don't we love technology? I go here, and I go share my screen right there. Share. Let's see what happens. Look at that. It worked. There's the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council. So the program I'm going to talk to you about is a travel training program, which is also CDOT funded through their TDM program, which you're going to hear more about later. Although the funding opportunity was offered through Dr. Cog. Denver, as you all know, has had some really terrible air quality reports lately, so we are very happy to be involved in helping to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles and onto trains, buses, bikes, and scooters to allow them to get to work or to school or to social services or to wherever they want to go. There are recent studies that have shown that using transit is as safe as going to the grocery store if you wear your mask and use your hand sanitizer and maintain your distances. There's a recent article out about air circulation on light rail, and I can put that, let's see if I can do all this stuff. If I go to the chat box, I can't go to the chat box while I'm screen sharing. Look at that. Okay, so I'll stop sharing and I'll go to the chat box and I'll put this link to an article about clean air inside transit vehicles. Specifically, it's about RTDs, light rail vehicles. So if anybody is interested in looking at that, it's in the chat box. The program is predominantly aimed at the immigrant and refugee community, but anyone who has a group of 5 or less can sign up for the program. It's completely free. DRMAC will provide RTD passes and Lyft vouchers to help people learn to use scooters and Lyft bikes, which are coming to town. The program will begin with an online introduction to the RTD app and the Lyft app. Participants will learn how to buy fare media online, for example, and how to renew. How many people here knew that you could refill your MyRide card at King Soopers and Safeway? So if you have a RTD MyRide card, you can fill it again just at the grocery store. I can put that information in the chat box too. That's the RTD MyRide program. Let's see if I can type and talk at the same time. There we go, I win. The first portion of the class, as I said, is going to be taught virtually. And if that's the only part you're interested, you can request that part of the training. We are looking to work with groups of 5 approximately. We are hoping to have family groups, small businesses, and others who are interested in learning how to use transportation, public transportation, take the class. Participants can request training on getting to a particular destination. If you want to learn how to get to your local grocery store or to the closest hospital, or the group can experience how to get to Union Station, which is where you can transfer to Broncos games. 5,700 people are going to be allowed in the Broncos game, or you can transfer there to get to the airport. So if those are travel options that you're unfamiliar with and you're interested in learning more about them, we're happy to do that. The program manager will travel with the group if a translator is necessary. The community organization who sponsors the travel training will provide a translator. There isn't anything on our website yet. Sorry, Kayla's got us beat. Because this is a new program that doesn't officially start until the beginning of October. But you can contact the program manager if you're interested in participating, or if you want to know more about how you can benefit, or if you know a group, a church group or a community group that is interested in having that training. The program manager is named Latoya Prante. And now for my closing statement, I'm going to put her email in the chat box and the number for the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to type and answer at the same time.
We have a couple minutes left here. Any questions about the travel training or DRMAC in general?
Okay, I did a good job. I told everybody everything they wanted to know. The contact information is in the chat box, and I'm good.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Joel.
Yes.
Mark Christensen.
Hi, Mark.
I don't have my video on because I'm doing dishes. But quick question, have you done any outreach to try and get any sort of discoverability for programs like this with major map providers, specifically Google and Apple? And by the way, I know that Apple has a major presence for their Maps program in downtown Denver, having basically hired people away from what used to be, well, MapQuest. And Google similarly has a fairly large map presence up in Boulder. So I'm just curious if you've attempted to make any outreach to those folks to try, because it's one of those things that you gotta get people interested and have them find out about this kind of stuff. So
Kate, sounds like a question for you.
We have not. That's a great suggestion. We have not attempted to do that as yet, nor do either of the apps that we are training on have any place that references back to travel training. But I will certainly get on that one immediately because that's a brilliant idea. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I've heard about travel training that Dr. Mack has run under different programs, different funding streams from time to time, and it always sounds so neat. Everybody who feels empowered to use all the different modes of transportation, especially transit, that can be intimidating if you're not familiar with it, you know, where to pay and how to figure out what the route is and so forth, can really benefit from somebody friendly showing them how to do these things. So whether it's a senior group or a family group, and anyone just who could really benefit from it and just wants to get started. It's a fantastic program. I'm glad it's found a new round of funding here. Thank you, Kate. Our next short topic, our final short topic, is also from Dr. Mack. We have a presentation by Ashley Dottie, and Ashley, you can share your screen. She's going to talk about the app version of the Getting There guide. In the email announcement, I did include a link to the Getting There guide. It's a publication, boy, I don't know what edition it's in, some high number, from Dr. Mack, and it lets you know how to get around, especially if you aren't as mobile as other people. If there's some particular challenge, how do you find out what's out there? Ashley.
Thanks, Joel. I'm Ashley Doty. I'm one of the 2 program managers over at Dr. Mack, and I oversee the Getting There app. And so as Joel mentioned in the agenda he sent out, that we have an app in development that brings our Getting There guide to your phone. And so the Getting There app takes the information from the guide and it puts it into a database that the user can filter through to provide the best transportation options for their needs. And those transportation options will include paratransit, volunteer, and private providers. This app was designed to have a simple interface so that it was easy for older adults and persons with disability to navigate. However, just like our travel training, it is available for everyone and it is also free. And the app will also be certified by a third party as a fully accessible app following ADA guidelines. I also did want to mention that when individuals download the app, they do not need to create a login to use it. So as soon as you download it, it is up and running for individuals to use. This app will also cover services offered in the 9 counties that make up the Denver metro area. So our main ones, but it's also going to include Boulder as well as Gilpin and Clear Creek out on the western side. So I wanted to just give you kind of a little preview over, sharing my screen, but it moved where I can't. There we go. See, there we go. Okay. So I wanted to give you a preview of the interface when you open it up. It's going to start like this. And the user is going to be able to enter where they are now. And so that gives them 2 options. You either use the drop-down bar to choose a county, or they can choose, I don't know my location, and that's going to use geolocation to pinpoint where they are. And then it's going to come over and ask where they want to go. So then they can enter either their exact location, or if you're like me and sometimes I don't know my exact location where I need to go, you can enter the city and the zip code as well. So then when you enter that, it's going to give you filters to even narrow down your providers even more, so the user can pick their age, 18 through 100 in the drop down. They can also pick accommodations if they have those, based if they need a wheelchair accessible vehicle or door-to-door service, or maybe they don't have any. And so there's a drop down for different choices to choose. And then they can choose if they're a veteran or not. And then also if they use Medicaid. And then the last one also helps narrow down, it's their ride purpose. So, you know, if you have a medical appointment, if you need to go to the airport, or if you just have an other need, so more personal, like I need to go to the grocery store or the pharmacy, or I have a social outing or something like that. So then once the user picks all of these filters, they're going to hit the little Get Me There button, and that's going to take them over to their next screen, which then provides the available transit provider list for them. And with that, they can either, so they can look at this provider and they can click more information, which will provide a drop down, so it can help them figure out who they offer services to, if there's a cost, hours of service, if they need advanced time to schedule, or any other additional information about that provider that will help them choose if that's the best option. And if they think, yeah, that provider is a great option for me, I want to contact them, they then can hit this call button, and that will pop up to call that, and they hit call. And so they can call directly from the app, or they can visit their website as well. So we'll take them to like a Safari browser and pop up the website for them. And if they go, oh, this option isn't great, they can close that and pick on a different provider option. And they also have the option to go, if they need to modify that trip, say they chose the medical appointment and now they want to figure out an option for going to the airport, they can go back and modify it, and then we'll pop up a new list for them, or they can start over as well. And I do want to note that this app is not actually scheduling rides for users through the app. It is just providing the information about the transit providers for the user. So then the user will schedule a ride either by phone or go on their website or something like that, whatever the actual provider has available to that individual. And then we also do have one other piece up here in the left-hand corner is the menu button. So that's just going to provide more information actually about DRMAC, and also our information and assistance line phone numbers on there if they need that. It's going to provide a service map of the counties that the app covers. It's also going to provide information about Medicaid, transportation, veteran transportation, the peak fare assistance through RTD Live program, and then also other tools you can access like Google Maps and stuff from the app. It will take you to their app. And so if anyone is interested in downloading the app, they can go to either the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and just enter in Getting There, and it will pop up and you can download. And this is the little icon that it will show up as on your phone for that. And so, and like I said, once it's downloaded, it's ready to go. There's no login information that's needed for that user. And also updates that will be coming up. We are doing some updates right now in the database still, just fine-tuning information. And then we are also eventually going to add, we're in English right now, but we'll also add languages of Spanish, Arabic, Russian, and Somali in the future. So is there any questions about the app? I know that was pretty quick, but I think that was the point.
Hi, this is John Rickey from Sun Valley. I have a question, though not about the app particularly. It was,
oh, okay.
Do you have information on, I often hear people say that we need to keep a car infrastructure and build more of it and allow more parking for ADA accessibility. And I was wondering how many people use private vehicles to get around when they have ADA accessibility, mobility issues, and how many people get around using other methods that might be addressed by using this app?
I don't know. Kate, I'm going to bounce this off you. Do you possibly have an answer for this?
Let me see if I have the question right. You want to know a number of people who use their own mobility modified vehicles?
Right, like what percentage of people with ADA accessibility issues use their own private vehicles versus the percentage who get around by transit or by paratransit or just by walking or rolling down the street?
I do not have that number. What I can tell you is that a vehicle that's modified for somebody who has mobility issues is usually extremely expensive. So I think there are not a great number of them. I know Councilman Chris Hines, who uses a wheelchair, has his own vehicle. I don't know, and I work with the disability community all the time, anybody else off the top of my head who uses their own vehicle. So I would guess that it's a small percentage. I don't know the number, I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions about the Getting There guide, paper or electronic?
And I do want to mention, Joel, if anyone is interested or has someone interested in more in-depth training on the app, you can just reach me at that email that Joel provided in the agenda. I'm the one who does those trainings, so I'd be happy to help you in any way with yourself or other individuals that may be interested.
Great. Thank you very much. That was another great short topic. I'll just oops. Yeah, I'll just add a little comment about this. When I think of kind of an ideal neighborhood welcome kit, you know, somebody moves to the neighborhood and their neighborhood organization brings them some things to say, you know, welcome to the neighborhood. You can think of all kinds of things that might be in there. And from transportation perspective, you can think about, here's the local bus routes and here's where they go, you know, getting people started. But I also think that the Getting There guide or a link to it, people don't know when they're going to need special assistance with transportation, you know, need transportation that's not the usual transportation. And if you flip through these guides, it's amazing the groups that are out there, and they're, you know, relatively unknown. They're known, hopefully they can be known to the people who need them, but you don't know you need it until you need it as an individual or as a family. So this is one of those things I would like to see in a welcome kit, so that somebody knows where it is and they can turn to it when their family needs it for mobility things. Thank you so much. Okay, we're now on to our bigger topics, our longer topics for the evening. We have Zachary Wallace Mendez, and you are all set up to share. And he's going to talk to us about the TDM program in the city of Denver.
All right, thanks, Joel. Hi, my name is Zach Wallace Mendez, as Joel mentioned. I am with the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. I wear many hats often, but one of the biggest hats that I wear is being the city's Transportation Demand Management Program Coordinator. And so that covers transportation demand management, both internally and externally. So for city employees, making sure that we have kind of a robust commuter system or options, I guess, for our own employees, but then also, you know, implementing TDM citywide. So I'll get into what TDM is, because I know many folks probably know what TDM is, but don't know it by that definition or by that name. So as I just said, we'll cover what TDM is. I'll talk to you a little bit about the planning process of this TDM plan that we're creating, what that requirement, which is ultimately the TDM plan recommends implementing a requirement, and then kind of what the next steps are to getting that kind of on the ground and going. So what is TDM? We like to use this definition: strategies that shift the how, when, and or where of people's travel behavior to increase system efficiency, reducing occupancy vehicle trips, and achieve specific planning goals. So essentially, it's like this image, right? So this is the amount of space that is required to transport the same number of folks by cars on the left there, bus in the middle, and then bikes on the right. And so by utilizing TDM strategies and incentives, we can better distribute trips across this spectrum. So right now, right, we probably skew a little bit more towards the left, but if we are more evenly distributed across the spectrum, then we have more space on our existing roadways for everyone. And that's really important, both because, you know, we have these citywide goals of helping folks shift, you know, because our roadways are really limited, and you'll see further down here, Denver is growing a lot. That's no secret to anyone on this call. And so, you know, our roadways are pretty fixed here in Denver. The city doesn't really have the money, nor does it want to be expanding roadways. We want to make sure that folks can get around by walking, by biking, by taking transit, but even by carpooling, by van pulling. You know, there are a lot of other options than just driving alone in a vehicle. So why TDM? You know, that was that first choice, making sure that folks have options. There are citywide goals that call for the reduction of emissions by 2030. You know, obviously transportation, it either is the first or second, I can't remember off the top of my head on the spot here, emissions producer in Denver, probably the US. I'm blanking on all my stats at the moment, I'm so sorry. But it is a major contributor to our emissions, which, you know, as Kate mentioned a few minutes ago, our air quality has been so bad because of these emissions, and it's getting really serious. And then of course, safety. The city has a goal, it's called Vision Zero, of 0 traffic deaths by 2030. Another reason why we like TDM is providing options and mobility freedom for all. So we want to make sure that folks do not have to, you know, buy, maintain a vehicle, all of which get really expensive. Insure a vehicle, right? All of that it's really expensive. I recently adopted a 16-year-old son who is like super excited to start driving, and no, the costs are just insane. It's really, I too personally do have a vehicle, and I kind of forget just because it's been kind of embedded in my budget for so long, but just adding that new, you know, thinking about adding a new person just on the insurance alone is really expensive and can be a real burden for a lot of families in Denver. So we want to make sure that folks have options to move around and don't have to feel like they must buy, insure, and maintain a vehicle. Growth, I touched on this a few minutes ago. Denver's growing. I think we're all very aware of that. Health benefits, I do like to throw this up here because active transportation, walking, biking, even if you're walking to the bus, does have a health benefit if you're not, you know, compared to walking 5 steps to your car, pulling out of your garage, driving to the front door. You know, like there's more active transportation when you're walking, biking, or using transit, and that does have some health benefits. And then of course, TDM has been found in a lot of plans that have been adopted recently. So Blueprint Denver, the comp plan, Denver Moves Transit, the Mayor's Mobility Action Plan, all of these plans call for some sort of TDM requirement or plan to be in place to help the city achieve its goals. And so that is why the city is moving forward with TDM, TDM requirement. We're not the first city to do this. There are cities across the country, as you can see here, that have these requirements. They kind of vary in how they take shape and form. And, you know, I mean, I won't list all of these, but some are fairly new, like San Francisco. I think theirs is only a couple of years old. Some are really old, like Seattle and the state of Washington. They've had TDM ordinances in place or requirements in place since the early 90s, I want to say. So, you know, all of these places kind of take their own spin on it based on kind of how they're developing or when they implemented it. But all of these places do have TDM requirements in place for their developers. And so, I mean, I guess I haven't done a good job of explaining that the city is moving forward with a TDM plan that creates a TDM requirement for new developments. So that's what all these cities do. That's kind of why, that was the why that I just explained is we are moving forward with requiring new developments to implement TDM strategies into their developments. So strategies that help folks utilize other forms of transportation other than just driving alone. So how I boil that down sometimes is just we're making folks think more holistically about how people get around at their developments than just providing a giant parking lot. So they'll have to think a little bit more holistically about that. And what I'm going to show you in a few minutes here will kind of help you understand how we formulate that. So how we started this planning process to determine kind of what our requirement was going to look like, how it was going to take shape. We established the goals, which are what I just talked through, you know, and a lot of those goals were not establishing new goals. They were just taking existing goals that the city had and kind of pulling them all together. Step 2, reviewing the applicable peer academic research. So as I just mentioned, all those other cities already have plans in place. And so we're not going to reinvent the wheel here. We're going to look at what has worked for other folks, what hasn't worked. So that was number 2. And then we met with this whole number 3 kind of spins off here and shows all the folks that we met with. And we met with a lot of these folks a couple of times at various stages throughout this planning process to understand kind of their side of a TDM plan requirement. So when we first went to them, we said, we're going to implement a TDM plan requirement, or a TDM requirement, excuse me. Tell us how that works for you. And so, you know, when we talked to developers, some of them had developed in places where this was already a requirement, so they told us how that worked for them. And, you know, we just kind of got everyone's input, both on that front end, and then kind of as we went through developing the draft concepts and all of that. Just to make sure that we're creating a plan that doesn't limit development necessarily, right? We don't want to implement something that stops development because no one can comply with it, or that stops affordable housing development, right? We don't want to put things into place that are stopping folks from being able to get their financing to build new projects or to develop new projects. We don't want to kind of be that roadblock. We want to make sure that folks can comply, but we also want to make sure that they can comply and meet what the city's goals are. So I won't go through each of these steps, but essentially we just started, you know, kind of crafting potential strategies and developing draft concepts. We vetted those through the city. We went to city council to talk to them about it. A lot of city council was very, I should say is very interested in this TDM plan. I said was just because we met with them. Gosh, I don't know. I guess maybe like 6 months ago, before the pandemic, was the last time we talked to them, but they were all very interested. And I assume that most should still be. And now we're kind of in 9 and 10, right? We're kind of finalizing those concepts. They're pretty much finalized. And we're working to create a tool so developers have kind of an easy place where they can understand what the requirements are. And then, you know, we're kind of, I guess, in 11 where we're starting to think about outreach, like this meeting here, outreach to developers to make sure that they know that this is coming, and all that kind of stuff. So what actually is the requirement? So the requirement is a citywide regulation for all new development. So it doesn't matter if you're building out in Green Valley Ranch or downtown, you will have this requirement. It will be implemented through a mix of ordinance and rules and regulations. There's a lot of kind of minute detail that we're putting into rules and regulations because a TDM plan and TDM requirements and SOB reduction rates, which, you know, kind of all fit into this, haven't been done in Denver or Colorado before. So we have good data from other cities, but sometimes that doesn't translate into new places, right? For whatever reason. So we want to make sure that we're able to easily adapt those, you know, kind of details as we understand more data from our own plan. We're not putting things into rules and regs so we can change it all in a minute. We're just making sure that we can kind of fine tune those details as we get more of our own data. The TDM plan or the TDM requirements will vary based on your development type, your development size, where you're located in the city. So that'll be based on the neighborhood contexts that come out of Blueprint. And then your proximity to transit options. So all of these requirements or all of these factors will produce a menu of options for developers. So that's why we're building that online tool, because there's kind of various things that kind of go into the inputs and then various things that could come out of the inputs based on these 4 things. So we're creating a web tool to kind of help facilitate that. And so there's not confusion and we're not delaying projects and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, based on these factors, developers will be presented with a menu of options that makes sense based on these characteristics. And then they can choose, you know, I'd rather, you know, I'm comfortable doing this. I've done this in projects before, or, you know, we're really close to transit. I'd rather just do an eco pass for my tenants, or whatever the case may be. So not every development that comes in has to do X, Y, Z. They could all do X, Y, Z, but they could also do A, B, C, A, F, G, you know, like whatever kind of fits, as long as they meet the reduction goal that also comes from these four factors, SOB reduction goal, I should say, that comes from these four factors. So they pick enough strategies. So they could pick one big strategy potentially. I don't know exactly how the strategies will shake out, but they could potentially pick one big strategy that helps meet their goal, and they just have to do that one thing. Or they could pick 5 little strategies that get them to their goal and help them achieve their SOB reduction rate. There's some pretty specifics here about, pretty specific details, excuse me, about kind of the different tiers. We are going to have 3 tiers of development, or 3 tiers, excuse me, of requirements, I guess you could say. The tier 0, those are the smaller properties. I'll go back here. So these are, you know, smaller properties. They have no requirements, so they will be exempt from the ordinance, just because they're not big enough to have kind of the money essentially to be able to either build or maintain over time these TDM strategies. And we want folks to be successful, and it begins not to make sense for those smaller properties. For those kind of mid-range properties that are tier 1, we are requiring them, you know, so their menu of strategies will include more infrastructure. So that's why we have TDM infrastructure here. So that's things in the ground. So that's a transit screen like we have in the city buildings downtown that say all the nearby bus lines and when they're coming, the nearby rail lines and when they're coming, the nearby scooters, the nearby car shares. I mean, it has kind of everything on there. So folks know, oh, okay, there's a bus coming in 2 minutes that takes me downtown. I'll just hop on that. Or that could mean building lockers and showers for bike commuters, so they have somewhere to store their helmet and shower when they get to work if they'd like to. So things of that nature. Infrastructure could also potentially mean like public infrastructure. So if a building happens to be, I don't know, like a block away from where a current bike lane ends, for example, you know, they could potentially extend that bike lane down to their project, so folks in their project are able to kind of hop on that bike lane and go, you know, to wherever that bike lane goes. Tier 1 will also be required to have a transportation coordinator. This is just someone that the city can contact and so who we know is kind of on file for us to be able to say, you know, hey, how are things going? Or hey, you didn't submit your report, which I'll talk about in a minute. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new FTE at that location. It could be a TMA potentially that is hired by the development to do that. It could just be the property manager who is well versed in kind of the transportation options that are being provided by this development due to the TDM plan. And then we also encourage memberships with the TMAs for those developments that are being constructed within TMA areas. So TMAs, quickly for folks who may not know, Transportation Management Associations. There are 5 across the city of Denver, and essentially their whole function is to implement TDM. So they, you know, a lot of them work with developers who are, you know, so some of the TMAs, I should say, who are in kind of development heavy areas, I'll say, you know, a lot of them are already working with developers to implement TDM strategies into their new developments. Some TMAs are working with a lot of the existing employers in the area to make sure that they know that, hey, did you know that you could sign up for an eco pass and provide that to your employees? Or we have the shuttle going through the neighborhood, you know that your employees can take it, you know, things of that nature. So the TMAs are really set up to do this type of thing. So we really encourage folks to work with the TMAs and potentially join them as members. Those tier 1 properties will have a monitoring component. So they'll be required to provide us an annual report that just says that what they installed, is still accessible to the public, is still operating and functional, and updating their transportation coordinator information as well, should that need to be updated. I'm going to come to compliance at the end just because it's the same for tier 1 and tier 2. So let me jump over to tier 2, the requirements for those. Now these are those large properties, right? So I'll jump back really quick. So more than 50,000 square feet of office or commercial, more than 300,000 square feet of industrial, more than 50 unit development. these are the large properties. So essentially the requirements are the same as the tier 1, except there's also a programmatic strategy element to these, or that will be offered that these properties need to implement into their TDM plans in order to be constructed. So programmatic strategies are things like providing eco passes to all of your tenants, or providing bike share credits so your tenants have the ability to just hop on a jump bike outside the development, or things of that nature, those types of programmatic strategies. In terms of monitoring, there will also be that annual reporting requirement, but then we'll also be doing biennial surveys. So the city will kind of host a survey that then these properties need to send out on every 2 years. And essentially what we're going to be doing with those surveys is making sure that they're achieving that designated SOV rate that I mentioned earlier. That's based on kind of these 4 requirements: the type, size, location in the city, and transit options. That will give them a target SOV rate, and then we'll be kind of every 2 years checking in to make sure that their strategies are meeting those rates, or that the development is meeting those rates through their TDM strategies. Sorry, it's been a long day.
Zach,
and then
this is Joel. Sorry to interrupt. You've got 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to say for those watching, could you define a couple of the acronyms like SOV?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, SOV is single occupancy vehicle. And I think I'm almost done. It's pretty much this, and then I can answer some questions with the last few minutes. So in terms of compliance, it's pretty straightforward. If a developer doesn't submit a TDM plan when they submit their plans to the city for approval, they will not get approval for those plans. If they fail to install before they want to get a certificate of occupancy to occupy their building, they will not get that certificate of occupancy. And then, if they fail to submit their annual reports, the whole goal of this program is not to be heavy-handed, penalty, money generating. It's to get compliance and help the city meet its goals. So we'll start with reminders, and then we'll kind of escalate that to the administrative citation process. And then if folks are failing to meet their target SOV rates, those tier 2 properties, we have a tiered result, or a tiered approach that's focused on resolution. So I mean, it kind of starts with working with the city to understand what strategies are kind of failing. If you're not meeting your SOV commute rate, then one of the TDM strategies that you've picked is not working. And so we start with trying to determine what that is and switch that out, and then things kind of escalate from there. It's a kind of a long process, but if anyone wants those details, I can certainly give them to you, but I won't dwell on them now. And then this is the last slide. Our next steps, we're working with the city attorney's office on those ordinance and rules and regulations, the outreach, like I mentioned earlier, creating that online tool for developers, and then just integrating this into the community planning and development's review process. So we're not creating a whole new process. This is just a new review on that existing process. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions. I'll just leave it on this last slide unless I need to, oops, I'll leave it here. So you have my email address actually. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Let's use the raise hand feature. If you go to the participants panel, you should find the option to raise your hand, and I'll call on people who raise their hand. If that doesn't work, we'll do something else. And while I'm watching for hands, I'm just going to ask this. This seems great in terms of the compliance for new development. That seems really well thought through here. How about existing properties? How do we incentivize or require existing properties to have TDM plans?
Yeah, as of right now, that isn't part of this process, but it is part of what we are trying to understand of how we can leverage potentially our partnerships with the transportation management associations in the city to do that, help us do that work. And it is trying to be identified right now, but it's not a part of this, but we are trying to understand what we can do potentially. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Okay. There was a question in the chat. The name listed is ALS. I don't know if this is for this speaker, but feel free to unmute yourself because I'm not seeing people's hands raised. Apologies if that option isn't there for any reason. the person listed as ALS. I can just this out. How can neighborhood organizations get info on newbies to the neighborhood? Okay. This sounds like actually in reference to an earlier comment I made.
Okay.
Zach, it doesn't sound so much related to this.
Okay.
Other questions? I know there was a fair amount of discussion a couple years ago at City Council when there were some zoning changes being discussed, and it had to do with changing the parking requirements. And at that time, Councilman Clark, I think Council President Clark at that time, among others, were calling for Denver to do more in terms of transportation demand management. And this program, I believe, is an outcome of those kind of discussions.
Yep.
What kind of impact have other cities seen from TDM programs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of the cities have, varying levels. Some places have them for like specific developments and things like that. I can't recite kind of how well each has done, but each of them has seen success. Gosh, and I used to know a great statistic about Seattle, and it's just not coming to my head right now, but Seattle has grown quite a bit in the last decade, as Denver has. And I recall something to the effect, and I'm gonna get this wrong, but the effect was that like 96% of the new commuters that were kind of commuting into downtown Seattle or just Seattle as a whole were doing so by non-single occupancy vehicle trips. And a lot of that is attributed to the kind of long-standing TDM plans that Seattle and the state of Washington had in place. So, much of their growth in the past decade was accommodated, or at least the commute trips were accommodated through bus, bike, transit, or rail, walking trips, things of that nature. So, I think that's probably one of the more successful models, but I think each of them has seen success. And we have a report that kind of details like the success that each of those cities that I mentioned earlier has seen, but there was no examples that were like, this didn't work here. It's helped each of those cities achieve whatever goal they were going for, right? So one of them was just to achieve a certain trip rate in a certain area, and it helped them achieve that.
Great. John, you've unmuted yourself.
Hi, this is John from Sun Valley again. Thank you for coming tonight. My question is, since transportation is inextricably linked to land use, are there any explicit land use goals in the TDM strategy? I saw you're reducing SOV trips and thereby VMT, which I assume is an explicit goal, but land use as well is an issue.
Yeah, so there's nothing in the plan that says, I believe what you're talking about is, where there should be density and things like that. There's nothing in the TDM plan that says, like, kind of, I guess, where that land use should be, but it is tied into land use, right? So the more intense your development is, potentially the larger SOV reduction rate you're going to have, or the closer you are to transit, the larger SOV rate reduction you're going to be required to achieve, I should say, not you're going to have, but you're going to be required to achieve. And so it does kind of feed into the land use system that way. If that answers the question.
I saw you had the map up of the context from Blueprint Denver, and it sounds like they're tied together at that point.
They are, yes. Yep. So yeah, the neighborhood contexts do factor in. That's what the location in the city that is referring to the neighborhood context from Blueprint. So it kind of recognizes the existing, I guess, character, if you will, of each of those areas.
So will suburban Denver have less requirements than urban Denver?
Yeah, their trip reduction rate will be different. The trip reduction rate is based on their existing SOV rate, and and then, you know, these various factors. But yeah, it could be higher than something downtown, for example. But it all depends. If something is in suburban Denver, but is right next to the A-line station, or, you know, the Southeast Rail Line, then it could potentially be, you know, pretty equal. It just kind of depends like where in those suburban contexts. That's why there's kind of multiple location. Well, I guess it's just the two, is like where they are in the city in terms of context, and then where they are proximate to transit. So that transit really factors in, especially when you're talking about the suburban areas.
Does location in the city also refer to location near amenities? Like, would someplace near a grocery store have more requirements than someplace buried on a cul-de-sac?
We haven't factored that in, but that is something interesting to consider, actually. Yeah, something that's just like near places. I mean, I guess some of that is kind of, well, no, sorry. I was going to say some of that's kind of factored in with the neighborhood context, because there's pockets of like the general urban in other places, but never mind, because there's shopping areas and things like that in like Southwest Denver that are not coded that way. No, that's actually really interesting. And that could be an easy addition, right? Because how we're building the website is just a series of essentially GIS layers, which is like a mapping software that could kind of utilize that data that we have. I'm gonna write that down and see. We have consultants helping us out with this who have done TDM kind of across the nation. So I'm gonna raise that, because that's actually really interesting.
Great. We have time for one more question. I see Lynn Brown has asked one in the chat. Lynn, do you want to unmute?
Sure. I was just wondering if part of this is looking at all at any parking maximums for new developments.
Yeah, that would be. Oops.
Seconded.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be great. We are working with CPD to understand where they are with that conversation. So right now, how the TDM plan is built is that if you build more than the minimum requirement, then your TDM requirement essentially increases. So if you build double the parking that the code requires you to, you will have more TDM strategies than you would, or you'd be required to implement more TDM strategies than you would if you only implemented, you know, the minimum that you're required. We are working with CPD to understand, you know, and closely to understand like where they are with their conversations. And I'm definitely not trying to be like, that's them, but we are working very closely with the folks who kind of work on the code updates and things like that. We're working with them kind of on the affordable housing code update that they're working on, because they'll have implications on how we can include affordable housing in here, because we definitely don't want to preclude affordable, or we don't want to preclude affordable housing from having these transportation options, but we also don't want to make affordable housing not pencil. So we're working with them in their code update, and we'll continue working with them kind of as this matures. So when we start getting parking maximums, we can kind of not shift the TDM plan, right? Because it'll always be kind of relevant, but just, you know, if something needs to tweak in the TDM plan, we're ready and willing and able to do that as kind of CPD has those discussions, or whenever they do.
Great. Well, thank you, Zach. I wasn't able to find a project website for this under Dottie. Is there one yet, or will there be?
There will be, yep. And I can, Joel, I can email you the link once we get that up and running. Yep,
Great.
There will be.
Great. Well, this is good news. I think it speaks to some of the concerns that neighborhoods have when there's new development.
Sure.
Is how are people going to get around? Is it all just adding car traffic? Are there other options? And how can we more strongly encourage? And I'm seeing this has a lot of more than just encourage, but require, which is definitely more than I expected. That's great.
Great.
I'd like to turn to our final speaker for the evening, Angie Rivera-Malpiede. She served on the RTD Board of Directors for quite some time and is now board chair. I reached out to her because the RTD topics are fast moving. We've had presentations this year about how the pandemic has hurt their finances. We've had presentations on the long range planning for Reimagine RTD. And then Reimagine RTD is taking a little break from that long-term focus while they help RTD deal with the near term. What are they going to do to keep people moving in a time of really limited resources that's likely to continue the rest of the year and into next year. They also have a new CEO and general manager who'll be starting soon. I reached out to Angie to talk about all these topics, and it was just so clear that we needed to hear right from her, and she's being very generous with her time. In an unscripted conversation, no PowerPoint, I'd like to introduce Angie Rivera-Malpiede.
Thank you, Joel. And I want to say hello to Bill James, my colleague, who used to be on the RTD Board of Directors. So I want to say hi, Bill. And Zach, you know, I wear a couple of hats. I'm also a Transportation Management Association Director with Northeast Transportation Connections. So we work very closely with Zach, who is also pretty amazing. And so NETC's been working on these whole TBM programming for, gosh, 18, 19 years now. It's been quite a while. But Joel, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed our chat. And I think, yeah, I am here, you know, I'm part of this community. I live here, I'm a native, and, you know, ask me what it is that you want me to talk about, and I'm happy to do it.
Great. Let's have people put some questions in the chat. And let me just start with, given the downturn in sales tax, and sales tax is a big funding source for RTD, and kind of what looks like the one-time nature of the federal help to transit agencies, it's not clear that's going to be repeated. What's the big picture strategy? How's RTD going to get by keeping people moving as we work our way through this?
Well, I guess what I would say to all of you right now is let me just kind of give you the lay of the land of where we're at. On Tuesday night, it was announced that we will be doing layoffs. The plan at this point, it's not firm and final, but it's going to be somewhere around 635 employees that have currently filled full-time and part-time positions. And really what we know we need to do is to be flexible and respond to our current reality. And we're no different than 99% of the transit agencies across the country. And so we really are trying to do our due diligence by working with our senior leadership team and making sure that we have our finger on the pulse and that we're able to really talk with our employees. So let me just kind of talk about what we're looking at in terms of what's happening right now. Next Tuesday, we're going to get a more in-depth analysis of what the admin cuts will be. What we know for sure now is that we're facing a $166 million deficit. And the way that that's breaking out is, you know, it's 25% of our budget. 65% of our budget is sales tax, and that goes for operations and maintenance. And, you know, fare box revenue is about 15 to 20%. The projection before COVID was $711 million. Today, it's somewhere around 571. With that, I would just say to you that, you know, we are really looking at a serious base $140 million deficit there. Our pre-COVID for fare box revenue was going to be somewhere around 129 million. And then we do incidental like ads on buses and stuff, which would have been 8 million. We're now at half of that. Unfortunately, what's happened is that our ridership has dropped 40%. And we did not charge fares from April through July 1st. And so we were losing literally millions of dollars. And that has really had an impact on the overall budget. So by the end of this month, the board's going to have to vote in the midterm financial plan or the mid-year financial plan. And that's going to include significant cuts in our staff as we move forward. We're hoping it's a short-term deal and that, you know, the economy will come back to where it was before, although I have to say to you, I'm concerned. When COVID started, I don't need to share with all of you because you guys are such strong advocates for alternative transportation. Nobody knew how this virus worked. And so they were predetermining that transit was the worst thing to get on because the virus could live in buses and trains. They have since then learned that that's not the case. However, there's a perception out there that getting on buses and trains is not healthy and that you could catch this virus, right? So we know for sure that we have transit dependent and essential workers taking transit services. But at this point, we've gone from about 365,000 boardings a day to about 140. We're down about 60%. And so, I mean, 40%. So it has made a tremendous impact on all of our numbers as we've gone up and down the line. The other thing that I think is really interesting that people don't think about is how fluid everything is because people are working from home, because, you know, the internet's not been up. We were getting a different number from the CU leads of school who told us in April that our deficit was going to be a lot huge. It was going to be huge. So we began preparing for that. But then they realized that they only had a partial number for March. And when they put it all together, it wasn't as bad as they originally projected, but it was still pretty horrific. So as we've been going down this road, we've been trying to figure out how do you work to make sure that you balance this budget. And you know, when I think about 635 layoffs, I think about 635 families, which is just really difficult. On top of that, we have just started negotiations with the new CEO, Deborah Johnson from Long Beach, California. And I think that she's coming in with some really significant background in terms of working with unions and developing, you know, CBAs to working with capital programs. So we are really excited about her ability to be a visionary and to take RTD into this next chapter of history that we're about to embark on. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that we are in an election cycle and we have 8 seats up for election. 4 of them are termed out and 4 are up for re-election. So former District Director Bill James' seat is up through Kate Williams. So, you know, Kate Williams is up for re-election. She has 2 opponents. You've got Director Ken Mahalik, he's up for re-election. He does have an opponent. Director Bob Broom is up for re-election and he does not have an opponent. So he will come back to the board. And Director Tisdale has 2 opponents, so that's going to be interesting. But what's even more interesting to me is Director Jeff Walker has 1 person running, so Bobby, I believe his name is Fisher, will be coming in to replace Jeff. And then you have Natalie Menton and former Mayor Marjorie Sloan is running unopposed, so she will be coming in. She's the former mayor of Golden. But then you've got Claudia Fulska, who also has Paul Rosenthal, former representative, is unopposed, so he will be coming in. But Director Judy Lubell in Longmont, Niwot, and Broomfield, there was only 1 person running, did not get the number of signatures needed. And so now the Boulder County Commissioners will appoint that position. So it's going to be interesting who becomes the dynamic on the board. And I think that that's going to be really fascinating. So my goal is to have Deborah Johnson at RTD by November at the same time where we know who will be elected to those 8 seats for the board of directors coming into 2021. So it's been a year of whirlwind. We're also on the 3rd meeting with the accountability committee that was put together by the legislature and the governor's office. But what I would like to say to you is RTD we decided before they even did the accountability committee that we were going to put together, that we were going to recall the fiscal sustainability committee to do a deep dive into RTD. And I would just like to talk really frankly about that. It was very clear to me that there was a disconnect on how people perceive RTD and what RTD is doing. So, you know, RTD is the 16th largest transit agency in the country. And we are probably one of the most, if not the most audited agency in the state of Colorado. But there's a perception that RTD is hiding a bunch of stuff, we're not doing our job, there's a bunch of stuff going on. And so I contacted Federico Pena for advice, and he said to me, why don't you start calling some key stakeholders and asking them one question? The question is, what is it specifically about RTD that concerns you? And so I did that. And what I found out was not surprising, but it was also an aha moment. And what I learned was there is a real gross disconnect between perception and reality. People don't know who RTD is. In fact, some of the people that I contacted who had been on the RTD board before and carry a really high office said to me, you should probably partner with something like Lyft and Uber to do first last mile connections. I mean, you need to be innovative. And I said, we're the first transit agency to do that in the country. And in fact, we had a huge press conference last year. Didn't know that. Then I talked to a business leader who used to work for the Denver Broncos. And she said to me, when I lived in Chicago, there was an app that I used that told me when buses came or trains came and left. And you need to do that at RTD. And I said, well, we have a transit app. I said, in fact, we have a really strong presence on social media, Twitter, Facebook. We even have our own newsroom. She said, I didn't know that. If I knew that, I would have sent it out. That was the common thread that I heard throughout. And because of that, decided that maybe we really did need to do an accountability, sustainability accountability to take a deep dive look into RTD. By then, the state legislators' transportation committee wanted to put together an accountability committee, so we decided to collaborate. So the collaboration includes 4 members appointed by the governor, 5 members appointed by the state legislature transportation committee, and then 2 ex officio members at RTD. And those are Lynn Geisinger and Troy Whitmore, who are the chair and vice chair of the government relations committee. And this 11-member board was really selected because of their area of expertise in transit equity, TDM, finance, HR. I mean, it really covers the whole spectrum. And so the goal is that by December 31st, they'll come back to the RTD board of directors and say, you know, we've looked into a variety of things and this is what we have found. What I'm hoping they're going to come back and say, which is what I really absolutely believe, is that we are still functioning under what I would call, you know, in the RTD Act of getting funding through the state sales tax, we're still functioning in 1969 ideas, and it's not working in 2020. This region has grown exponentially. We have diversified, and RTD cannot keep up with it. We don't have the funding to be successful. And we're going to need the state to step up and really help us get to that next level to be able to provide service for the entire region. And I think RTD has done an amazing job with the resources that they've had. But the other thing that I will tell you is this has been like a building block for me. And putting together a committee headed by Bruce Apel to meet with literally every department and look at every division and see every single job Is there redundance? Is there what needs to be taken away? What needs to be added? That we really are cleaning house in terms of trying to make sure that we are functioning at the highest level for the good of the taxpayers. So it has been one heck of a year, I have to say, as chair. But I really feel like we're on a great trajectory in terms of moving this agency forward where it needs to be moved to. And, you know, it's going to take all of us to move it together. So that's kind of where I'm at as the chair. It has been an extraordinary learning experience for me, but this is a good board, and it's a committed board, and we have a stellar staff. And Bill James can tell you, this is a pretty great group of people who are also members of this community. So it's been quite extraordinary. So, you know, that's kind of the overlay of where I've been living in the last couple of months, and I'm open to any question.
Thank you. We had a question. We'll kind of start with nearer term and then look longer term.
Okay,
So
sure.
really near term, John Rickey has a question about mask use on transit. John,
Yes.
do you want to ask it?
Sure. I was asking, what plan do you have to enforce mask use on trains? You said that people know now that direct contact isn't an issue, but you know, mask use definitely is. And right now, people flaunt it, and so we're staying off buses.
Right. John, thank you for that question. It's a really important question, and I'm not kidding you. I have woken up at 2 in the morning thinking about this. We have, because the governor has mandated masks, that has helped us. I mean, that has helped us so much. But the reality is we drive buses and trains, period. That's our job. We are not enforcers. We can't be. We have some masks at the front of the bus, so if somebody comes in the bus, we can say, here's a mask, you don't have one on. If they say, no, I'm not going to wear one, it could also be they'll say, I have a medical condition, and according to Title VI and civil rights action, we cannot force people to do it. And so people get really—
You can force them off the bus, though.
Pardon? I'm sorry?
Don't let them on the bus.
Well, we could try and do that, but that's not a bus driver's role. And it could cause an altercation. And in fact, we've had altercations. Just 2 weeks ago, a woman got on the bus, and the next woman got on the bus without a mask, and she refused to put one on. And it ensued into a fist fight. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that is really difficult to deal with. We have 10,000 bus stops. We have over 1,000 buses. And we are on a very succinct time frame of getting from one point to the next point to the next point. Our bus driver's job is to drive that bus. It is not to be enforcers of masks. And I understand exactly what you're saying, but the reality is that we do not have the personnel or the expertise to make people put on those masks if they refuse to.
Well, I guess we're all screwed then.
We are all screwed. And the other thing I will say to you is we have signage, we have put it on social media, we talk to each other, but you're going to get people who just refuse to wear masks. And I don't know about you, I live in North Denver and Highlands, and I can't tell you how many people around here refuse to wear masks. And in fact, I've asked people to put on their masks, and they've turned on me. So it's really turned into a really ugly kind of discussion within our community. You would hope, like hell, that people would put them on when they get on public transportation. But, you know, in looking at the whole population we serve, which is literally everybody, there are some people who cannot wear a mask because of some kind of medical or physical condition that they cannot. So, I mean, John, I wish I could give you a much better answer, but the reality is that we have to be responsible for our own selves kind of deal. So it is unfortunate. And I'm on the buses all the time, and I know how you feel, because I feel exactly the same way. But the reality is that is not our wheelhouse.
Yeah, difficult. And we see social media posts and other examples across the country of Americans are not comporting ourselves to our highest standards.
They are
That's
not.
for sure.
What I will say though, Joel, is at the very beginning of this whole COVID component, people were saying, don't ride buses, don't ride trains, the virus will live on surfaces, they're going to do all this stuff. Since then, the CDC has determined that that's not correct information. That's the first thing. But the second thing is RTD has been working diligently with the CDC. We have now gotten state-of-the-art, kind of like when we go in and clean the buses and stuff, it's being done with a chemical that we can spray on that stays on, and they're finding that the virus does not live on surfaces like they originally had thought it might. So, I think this is such a fluid dynamic of what's happening, and we're just trying to keep one step ahead of it. And learning as we can learn and implementing what we can learn. And then the other part of it is then when we do go to purchase things, they're sold out because everyone across the country is trying to buy it at the same time. So I think our team has done a dynamic job of going in and making sure the buses are clean and sanitized and that people are safe. But in terms of mandating people, we're asking them that we're telling them they have to wear masks. But if they refuse to, there's nothing we can do about that.
Okay, let's turn to the longer term. There's a question from Mark Christensen.
Yeah, hi there, Mark Christensen. I'm in University Park. And you mentioned something about that sort of original, I think it was 1969 charter from the state legislature that set up RTD. And I remember seeing a quote actually during the legislative session from, I believe it was actually a Democratic legislator who said something about basically RTD has its own problems, and really no acknowledgement from the state legislature, from this specific state legislator at least, that RTD is a creation of, at the end of the day, of the state because of its multi-county nature. And given the long-standing challenges, not just with funding, but the political tensions and the fact that Denver has started to make some moves to potentially set up its own transit services, I've really started wondering, is RTD really viable as an entity long-term? At this point, the multi-county nature of it really just seems tenuous at best.
I think that's a great question. So in 1969, the state legislators decided to enact the RTD Act, and at that time they had an appointed board of 21 people, right? It was the combination of two bus companies that started RTD. It was the Denver, and I've actually got it right here because I was wondering, I knew that maybe this question would come up, but it really did combine two bus companies. There was a Boulder company and a Denver company to become the transit district. We serve over 40 different municipalities and just a whole group of folks, right? And so what they found back then was that this was a very important entity in 1969. 1969 to 2020, we have changed. Clearly, we have changed a lot. Here's what's interesting about it. You do have the Department of Transportation Infrastructure, DOTI, at Denver, which is great. When I talked to Commerce City, I said, do you think you guys would be willing to work to help fund bus routes? And their response was, no, we don't have that kind of money or ability. So you've got the whole gamut from Boulder to Denver to smaller communities that say we can't do that. That's up to you. But the one thing that I will tell you about transit is that it clearly has changed over the last 10 years, but more than that, it has become the economic backbone of our community. Without transit, there is not going to be jobs or businesses coming here because they need a viable transit system that will go the entire region. But the other thing I'll tell you is RTD is the 16th largest transit agency in the country. We serve over 2,300 square miles, and Bill James can jump in on. The last I heard, it was about the size of the state of Delaware. And when you think about that geographic footprint, and you understand that there are 15 elected board members that represent about 3 million voices, and we literally cover every demographic that is known to mankind with very limited resources, they've done a pretty damn good job in light of everything that they've got. Are we viable? Absolutely, we are viable. Do we need to work together? Yes, we do. I think the reality is that people need to stop blaming RTD for everything and understand that they're doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And I remember when Bill and I were on the board together, and the economy just dropped, when they were going to build fast tracks. They had put together this whole plan, financial plan, and it was based on 30 years of financial information. This is what's worked for the last 30 years. Nobody knew that the economy was literally going to fall out, and that the price of, I'm trying to think of it. I mean, they were astronomical. Bill, maybe you can help me out, but like the price of, what was it? It was a metal that went up like 800%. I mean, they were numbers nobody had ever seen in their lifetime. And those kinds of things have happened now several times to RTD, unfortunately. You've got that, and then who knew we would have a worldwide pandemic that literally was going to annihilate millions of people's lives? I mean, it just is uncanny when we think about that. But in that whole group, I would say to you, transportation has come to the top. It is an essential, vital component to our economic vitality and for our communities to thrive and to provide services for each other so that you really could succeed in your life. Because without transportation, communities will just die. And so it is not just a bus that goes from point A to point B, but it is a connector of community. And that's what makes it so crucially important.
Director, I'll just take the last question because we're just about out of time here. The Reimagine RTD effort, as that's been moving along, and I followed it relatively closely, they have starting to take shape an optimized system network out, and I guess it's longer term. This is post-COVID, return to kind of normal funding assumption. And looking at it from like 4 different lenses, if it's, try to get the most ridership possible or try to serve the communities where equity is a concern the most, 4 different kind of takes on it. And the message to me is that most of those networks look largely similar. That is, there's some large amount of direction that's being pointed that we can be efficient in carrying more people, provide more frequent kind of backbone service, whether by bus or by rail, and serve communities, and essentially make more of the transit dollars we have in terms of the network design. I know that's kind of on hold, just because it's all hands on deck dealing with the current crisis. But do you see RTD remaining committed to a system redesign to achieve those goals?
You know what, I really do. And the other thing that I would say to you is, really in fairness to the new general manager that will be coming on board, I would like for her to be able to take a look at this. As you know, we started Reimagine, 2 years ago under Mr. Genova's leadership. Things have changed. I mean, drastically changed. We wanted to take a pause for a couple of reasons. It's not that we're not committed to all of the hard work that's been done by the community and the key stakeholders, but to really give ourselves an ability to take a deep breath, look at what's happening, where we're going, because the world has changed dramatically from the time that we started that work to this very point. And so, you know, we are planning to go back and revisit it and take it out of pause and figure out how we move forward with it again. We're also very clear about taking a look at the geographic equity component of this. And so there are a lot of pieces to this that we have a lot of unfinished business. But right now, what's at hand is making sure that we move forward with the resources that we have. So, and I know that that's not a great answer, but it's the only answer I have at this point.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you. We had a good crowd tonight. I think we were pushing 30 people at one point. We will be meeting every month. Please send in your ideas to transportation@denverinc.org for topics you want to see. We're starting to assemble that agenda for next month already. Director, thank you very much.
Joel, thank you for the invitation, and thank you, everybody.
All right. Good night.
Good night.